Hey, we are going live. It's Adam Post. Great to be here with Dan FRAGA, the amazing Dan FRAGA and Adam Post getting together to talk
Right.
about the future of comic books. Dan,
Yeah,
how are
no,
you doing, my brother?
I'm doing all right. Cinco de Mayo, it was tacos on Taco Tuesday with Cinco de Mayo with the beer named after what is keeping us home,
For
or
sure.
the other way
And
around.
it was also Bacon Saturday.
Yeah,
Bacon
it
Saturday for
certainly
you
was.
just this past Saturday. Just a quick rundown on what was the bacon deal?
Uh, Somehow a conversation got put down with John Malin about bacon, and he
Mm-hmm.
was uh, doubting Thomas with that bacon is as good as people think, and he said that he thought that bacon was only good because we've been marketed bacon our whole lives, and that it's not as good as people think it is, and that he prefers ham, and that most people, if given the option between ham and bacon, would choose bacon. And then so I said, I'm going to make this a goal. When I hit 1,000 backers, I'm going to have pork extravaganza, and I'm sending Mrs. Frega to the store to pick up all the pork products she can, ham, bacon. I wanted linguiça, chorizo, and the bacons of bacon, the pork jowl. I only got some of it, but I did get ham and I did get bacon. And clearly, like even my 1-year-old chooses bacon over ham, and she hasn't
Bacon
been
is
marketed to.
Bacon's really powerful. Bacon can be mixed with ketchup. I remember when I discovered Canadian bacon, I was like,
Mm.
thick bacon? That's pretty good. That was enough for me. So I'm a bacon
Yeah,
fan.
yeah,
I'm a total bacon fan too.
yeah.
Everybody, whether you not like bacon or not, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and you will be part of the Adam Post Speaks channel. I did want to talk to Dan about bacon, but I also want to talk to Dan about comics because Dan, like me, and I'm sure like a lot of you guys, have been like passionate about comic books kind of ever since you first discovered them. And of course, Dan has Black Flag running now, and Black
Mm.
Flag is a huge Comicsgate success. We're really, really excited for you, Dan. We know you're going to
Thank
hit
you.
100K. It's funny, and I was telling other friends in Comicsgate, like it's so significant to have somebody who was a part of the '90s, who is a high energy, great artist, cool personality, just being part of Comicsgate. It's more important for you to hit 100,000 than it is for other people to hit, lower numbers, because we just want to show what Comicsgate can do and just show the love, right back to you for how you feel about comics. It's how we build it all together. Dan, so
Exactly.
comics for you and for me too, comics is something that it's going to be around, right? I mean, movies, TV, video games, no matter what's competing with us, you feel like comics is going to be around and be a part of people's lives for a long time.
I absolutely do, and obviously I have some bias. My DNA has newsprint in it or something that
Mm-hmm.
makes me feel very connected with comic books. But I just know as a story communication tool, it's super powerful. It has its own set of conventions that are unique unto itself, that are at times I feel more effective.
Yeah, because
And
it's a unique tool,
yeah,
right?
yeah, right, yeah. I mean, you can get deep dive into Neil Cohen's book about comics, or Scott McCloud's book about comics, or even Will Eisner's book. But I'm just saying, like, you can lose yourself and get an experience that's very much what's different than, say, a movie, uh, than a comic or a TV show. In a comic book, the reader participates. Very much like a novel. Like when you read a Frank Miller story, there's this narrator that's very unique. You read a Spider-Man story, there's a narrator, and the voice of Peter, the voice of that cast, whatever book it is you're reading, you participate in that. You're also participating in the idea of what happens in what I call what happens in the gutter, which is the place in between panels. If I show one action here and another action here, the time that happened in between the gutter is being filled in by the reader, and that's something that's super powerful and very connective. And it's something that I don't think is going to go away. Obviously, um, times are different. You know, I always cite 1989 as my favorite year in comics, and that was because you could go to your comic store and pick up
Yeah.
everybody that was at the top of their game was in a shop, and you can get them at a good price point. And then furthermore, I had this discussion back maybe 20 years ago where we were talking. This is right after the X-Men movie had come out, and I used Wolverine as an example because he was very topical at the time. You back in 1990, if you wanted your Wolverine fix, the game, the Super Nintendo game was okay. The cartoon was fair, even though they gave Wolverine an Australian accent. The toy was, even the Secret Wars toy, while based on a Mike Zeck design, never really approached how cool the comic was.
I love Mike Zeck.
Yeah,
I love
me
Mike
too.
Zeck's take.
Basically, the pinnacle of Wolverine was the comics. So comics was the place to get that sort of feeling.
The whole experience, the Wolverine experience.
Yeah, flash forward to 2001 or 2, whenever the X-Men movie came out, and Hugh Jackman's representation of Wolverine was much more exciting than anything you saw in a comic book because it was moving and breathing. And suddenly the high end of the totem pole, which was the comic, is suddenly moving down. Video games start to move it and push it down, but it doesn't mean it isn't part of the experience.
And just in terms of uniqueness, I haven't really sat around thinking about it a lot. But one of the things I always kind of thought of was cool with comics is like thought balloons.
Oh yeah.
It's like, all right, you see this character is thinking this thing, and then you're able to, like, you're reading the whole story. You're not being told the whole story because the writer's not giving everything away to you, but he's giving you a piece of something that the other characters aren't aware of, because you get to see that character's thoughts.
Yeah, and it works with captions too, and that, like in movies like Blade Runner, the narrator version of Blade Runner, it feels very cliche, or it sounds like Star Trek Captain's Log, where it's juxtaposition. But in a comic, it works really well. Like if you saw a guy fighting a bunch,
it's subtle. It's subtle.
It's very subtle. But if you got a guy fighting like a bunch of ninjas, and there's just like blood and like throwing stars and arrows flying, and this guy's looking badass, but the caption is like, "This reminds me of 3rd grade when I got in the fight with the bully," and it's like,
that's the, it could be the omniscient author, it could be the character.
Yeah. And when you're stacking action, so you're getting sort of a twofer. You're getting this action of this fight plus whatever flashback this character or the narrator is giving you. It's so unique. It's so unique to comics, and it creates a visceral experience that I feel like is I don't want to sound like a weirdo, but I feel like it's good for
the soul. we're both a little bit of weirdos, Dan.
I feel like
level with you, brother. Comics
are good for the soul, dude. That's how I feel.
Well, you get that engagement and that immersive experience. The thought balloons I thought were interesting. I like what I want to just spend a little time talking about, like what I feel and what you feel like is the uniqueness of comics. Like as we're creating them, as we're reading them and engaging with them, and because to me it is kind of like, it's like it's a passion, and you reference like the experience of being between panels when people are reading things. And actually I'm not familiar with that as a take of like, well, here as a storyteller, this is how I use the space between the panels.
Yeah, well, if you think about it this way, let's say you saw 2 people, and it's a low angle. Maybe you see them at the top of a building. A guy's got his eyes closed, and he looks like he's about to kiss this girl, and he's got flowers behind his back.
Yeah,
and the girl's standing there. The next panel you see is over the girl's shoulder, and you see petals floating down, and you see a big splat at the bottom. So you see that's panel 1 and panel 2. What you can assume there is that, and it's especially if you put a smile on her face, that she shoved him, but you never saw the shove. You saw him waiting for the kiss, and then him falling and splattering, and her smiling. So that in between the gutter is created by the reader. Like, did she shove him hard? Was she malicious when she did it? it asks the reader to participate in the story
and to think about it.
That's what I mean by in between the gutter. Like, you don't have to show every moment. You can have little in betweens.
You've directed live action, you've directed animation, and you've taken some of that into some of your directing work too.
Oh yeah, but I mean, it's very strange because when I was a comic book artist, I had like very different stages, right? I worked in print, in pre-press, learning all the technical. I also learned all this antiquated stuff about ruby lith and letraset lettering.
I'm with you. I know all that stuff, man. Blue lines. We were talking about blue lines the other day too.
So I literally learned all that shit. Got into a professional gig right out of high school that I worked for like 6 months before I got into comics, where everything I had learned was antiquated. But then, as a comic book artist, I broke in, and this is one of those weird things that I feel like it's a unique perspective. Like when I look at all the guys I admire, even like we can go way back. We can go to like John Byrne and all the Charlton and like the stuff he did. But I'm going to use like sort of my contemporaries. You look at Jim Lee. People don't know about Samurai Santa, but it's his first.
I know about Samurai Santa.
I know you do. I know you do.
I was in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I was that guy ripped me off. Gary Bradford, Colson Comics. He ripped off everybody. So he published he distributed G.I. Jackrabbits for me. My first.
I have some Solson books like the Ninja Training.
Oh man, I definitely. I mean, I've got to see him, whether it's now or later. I got to see him.
Yeah.
But he told me like there's this guy Jim outside. I don't want to trust him alone with my like my furniture and swords and stuff. He was just being a dick. He was being a total dick. So I was waiting in Gary's back office when he went to go see Jim when they were doing Samurai Santa.
Yeah.
Was Samurai Santa his first published work?
That I know of. Samurai Santa was his first, and it looks like shit, right?
Samurai Santa is a black and white parody, guys. It is what you think it is. It's just the total like exploitation Santa Claus as a samurai. I mean, I think I have the book too, and I think I've never even read it or looked at it. It is what it is.
Then Jim came and cut his teeth on Alpha Flight. And then Jim went in on Punisher War Journal, where Carl Potts was doing layouts for him, and Jim was doing finishes. And Carl was basically training him up, right? So by the time Jim Lee became Jim Lee on the X-Men, like, oh, Jim Lee, like he did the Mandarin issues.
Yeah,
he'd already had like 20, 30 books under his belt, right? And that happened with Liefeld. Liefeld did, some Megaton stuff. He did Hawk and Dove, and then he did some annuals, and then went on to New Mutants. But he still built up to that point. McFarlane, McFarlane had Coyote, Infinity Inc., Invasion. Then he went to Hulk. Then he went, and he did like an issue of G.I. Joe and Daredevil that people don't know about.
I saw a sketch that McFarlane had that he put out on Twitter 6 months ago, whatever it was, of Spawn, like in I guess it was the early 1980s.
Yeah.
No chance of publishing it or anything else like that. But he had his idea for his character. And
That's called Vision, man.
Yeah, I always thought it was going to be like something where he did a version of Spider-Man. Yeah. Like some combination of Spider-Man. And maybe it was, I don't know. But he had designed it first. He designed it long ago.
So
very cool.
So you look at these guys and you go, by the time the world, quote unquote, discovered them, by the time the world said these guys are overnight successes, they still had 10, 20, 30 issues under their belt. For me, I broke into comics. I drew a backup feature in Youngblood Zero, which sold stupid amounts. And then I did Bloodstrike, like literally my second book, but my first all by myself book was Bloodstrike 1, which sold 1 million. So my career, I literally was like, I got to make all of my mistakes in the brightest of light.
Oh, for sure.
And I was only 18 and, I was kind of stupid. So I consider like the first parts of my comic career, like 1991 to 2001, I consider myself like sort of aimless and trying to find things. When I broke into doing storyboards, I really thought, oh, this is going to be 1 for 1. Like I can just transpose my drawing skills over to storyboards. And what I found was there were a lot of things that that I had major deficiencies in as far as cinematic storytelling. They're completely different rules. They're, you know, one of the things.
But also, just sorry to interrupt. When you came
Yeah.
into Image,
Yeah.
they were not big on editors at Image.
No,
right?
not at all. No.
So who did teach people like this is how you do comics, or was it like as long as it looks cool, you're good to go, keep drawing?
The second one.
Okay, as long as it looks cool, you're good to go, keep drawing.
Yeah, there was really nobody to kind of rein
No
us in.
mentoring.
No,
mentoring.
and like, I mean, no knock on Liefeld, but like he had his own thing going, and
yeah, no,
he's one of those by the seat of your pants guys who couldn't really tell you why he does what he does.
Yeah, I'm that way with a lot of the things that I do, and you know, I just the reason I bring it up is, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like that's why, to the extent that we can for the future of comics, we want to think about institutionalizing things to the point where people, there is a mentoring method, you know, for people somehow.
Well, yeah,
so we don't all make the same mistakes.
We're definitely going to get there in this conversation for sure. But one of the major differences I noticed in drawing comics and storyboards and then directing, which is a major difference, is the fact that a comic book is graphical, right? And it sits on a two-dimensional page, and you both want to move the reader's eye from the top to bottom, left to right in a dynamic way. But also there's an order of in which the people speak. And in a movie, it doesn't matter. You can stage a scene in a way that's very interesting and for a composition. But if this guy back here in a movie talks first, and then this person talks and this person talks, it doesn't matter where they are geographically in the frame. In a comic, it absolutely does. And when you move the camera, and if that person does an action, you got to make sure that it leads. So it's not just staging in space. I took a lot of those things. So
you were talking about the importance of sequencing dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good little idiosyncratic thing there.
It's not, and for an artist though, you're also having to consider your staging in that left to right fashion, where in movies you don't. You can also move your camera. There's sound effects. There's music. There's all these things in movies that aid the feeling. We have to do it with context, how things build up. So, for example, if you go too crazy and you make everything a double pager, everything's big, nothing will feel bigger than that big. But if you do, say, like, take The Watchmen, right? And you take Dave Gibbons' work, and everything was structured on that grid, and everything was small, but you got used to this sort of feeling of this is how the storytelling goes. So then when he puts one big panel, which may represent a third of the page, in there, it seems larger than life because of the context.
The context changes.
Right. The context changes. And like a lot of the Image books, and I'll say Black Flag is constructed with both things in mind. I want things to be really loud, but I'm also constructing things to be quiet.
This is new Black Flag.
The new Black Flag. But I'm definitely not conservative, I'll tell you that much. There's, I love Stephen Platt, I love Todd McFarlane, and there's a little bit of each in there. But going talking about the future of comics, and especially Comicsgate, one of the things I've brought up in my stream, which I'm trying to make sure people understand, because it's an abstract concept, and it's one that hit me about a year ago. I was reading this book. I forget the author, but it's the history of Marvel Comics. It's called Marvel Tales or something. And I'm reading it, and it's talking about the very beginnings, and then it goes into the 90s, and it goes into today. And there's a chapter in there about Heroes Reborn, and it's talking about Rob Liefeld, and it's talking about the time he was holding his pages hostage, so that Marvel would have to send him a check to get the pages. But what they would do is Rob would send a guy, a courier, to New York with a zip disk, and when the check got in that guy's hand, the zip disk was handed to Marvel, like some weird espionage thing.
Was Marvel screwing him around with money?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm reading this story, right, in this book, and everything else up to that point was just a story. But then I got to the stuff that I was like, I know that because I was the courier. I'm the guy that flew to New York with the disc.
Ah.
I'm him, right? And I'm like, holy shit, man. And I'm reading about me in a book, but like it was just really sort of strange.
That's a strange perspective.
Yeah. So then I realized, like, especially like with Comicsgate, I was going through somebody's campaign, and I saw that they had originals available, and I said, man, these prices are really low. And I realized right then and there, we are and this has happened to me before, starting at Image, before Image started. We're part of something right now in the very beginning. Imagine Marvel 1960.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. You actually have a very interesting point of view, because we a lot of people talk about, like, well, Comicsgate, it could be like Image 2.0. Rob Liefeld isn't feeling that, and I think you said you'd heard, he'd even told you, I think, direct, that not really, because it wasn't that you guys were famous artists leaving a major company. Yeah, technically not, but the artist culture. But what it felt like at Image 1.0, because you were there at Image 1.0 early the F on.
Yeah,
So
ground zero, before it was even announced. I was part of Image in December of 91. Image was announced in February of 92. So I was there when CNN went to the studio and interviewed the 7 guys. I went to dinner with them afterwards. So I got to see it. And again, that's the weird thing, is when I have a saying, when you're in the jar, you can't read the label. So I'm telling people right now, like, read the label. Comicsgate, I absolutely believe, is Marvel 1961. It's Image Comics 1992. These are pieces of history. So getting on board, getting these books, getting College of the Dead, getting Patrick Thomas's, Johnny Phantasm.
He's a good man.
Yeah, getting these books, you're getting them, and these are like, you want to talk, like, I don't want to get crazy. First off, they're great, right? And it's good for comics, it's good for the customer and all of that. But everything that Image was about, as far as the hype back in the day, people bought cases of Spawn thinking they were going to put their kids through college. But what ended up happening is, when you do that, when there's that frenzy, it's the rule of economics. Now there are so many of these things that they're not worth that much.
Just because too much supply, and there could be plenty of demand, but there's never going to be
and the
that kind of demand.
But the reason, say, something like Ninja Turtles #1 is worth so much is because there were only 3,000 of them. And
that's actually probably the print run of College of the Dead's going to be. That's not necessarily going to be Ninja Turtles, but that's a supply demand deal.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, though, because 5 years from now, when College of the Dead, whatever let's say
every 6 months we're doing a new one, so it's the numbers keep going up.
Right, but let's say College of the Dead becomes whatever it's going to become. It could be the Walking Dead. We don't know, but people are going to kick themselves that they don't have a first printing of College of the Dead. They will, and that's just the nature of it. So I try to encourage people to get on board there. Number one, not to miss out on such great content and material that respects the reader. We're crafting things with, I craft things with myself in mind, and it's because I call myself Fan X. I'm like, or it's like patient zero, right? Like, I know that if this is keeping me sitting here for 10, 12 hours and not getting up because I'm so excited to do it, that's going to translate out. So there's that level of creatorship and all of that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. You got a second.
No, I'm saying the second, what you were talking about as far as like mentorships and editorial and things like that. I know on my stream, you and I, we talked about like the 3-stage sort of problem, like, getting it to the reader. The reader has a problem. The retailer has a problem. Distribution has a problem. Mainstream creators have a problem. but creators in general have a problem. I meet guys, you know, guys like Phil Diaz of Zaid Comics,
Good
and
people.
yeah, seeing Magic Cop, getting excited about the Lost Pages, and I go, dude, this guy. I mean, I don't, not in a patronizing way. I'm like, that's a kid, right? Like,
Yeah, he's a young man. He's a young man.
He's literally half my age, right?
Mm.
And I go, holy shit, how exciting is that there's somebody that into this, that it just makes me know that without a shadow of a doubt that comics are here to stay. And people need to learn their history. There was ebb and flow. Comics almost died several times. I mean,
comics would have died without crowdfunding back in the day. What I mean by crowdfunding back in the day was in the 1970s, and I was a kid then. All right, I was like not even 10 years old. I was born in 70, but in the 1970s, controversial figure, you know, Steve Jeppy was a retailer back then, reselling old comics, and just started getting involved in selling new comics. And then back in the way it worked was this guy, Phil Suling, set up a distribution business with Marvel to buy comics on a non-returnable basis so that collectors, when they wanted to get the new issue of Spider-Man, they could get the new issue of Spider-Man. But to buy those books as a retailer, Steve Jeppy had to prepay, and he would get them at 40% off a cover price, and he had to buy them in bundles of 25 copies.
Right.
The reason I know this is I was watching, he's a controversial figure, but he's getting more involved in YouTube. So he was in an interview last week. He's going to be in another interview tomorrow on Dan Shaheen's channel, talking to comic book publishers.
Nice.
But yes, it should be interesting. But in any case, he was explaining how the reason they got into new comics was they were hustling old comics and hustling back issues and making money off of that. So It was kind of a lost leader to get people interested and get people involved.
So smart.
But how is it crowdfunding? Well, the way it's crowdfunding was just a few years later came whatever it was, Dazzler #1, you know, the first direct market sales only comic from Marvel. And then other comics that indie publishers, Ninja Turtles could have never exist without the direct market. The direct market comic stores is crowdfunding. It's old school crowdfunding, just the way that selling through Amazon is like selling mail order. You know, you place your orders in advance. And back in the day, they had to prepay when they were buying their comics. The publishers add up the numbers. They give it back to the distributor. Distributor pays, goes to a retailer, then goes to a fan. But the point is, it's really still crowdfunding. It's not the newsstands that are making comics happen. There's a new publisher, Allegiance Art, that's in Walmart as a returnable deal, and God bless them, and hopefully that works out. But it's all the same, where it's based on people who love comics, guaranteeing that they're going to buy them in the future, that drives the whole business. Yeah,
one of the things that fueled my comic collecting habit, and it was the first time I learned about what you're talking about, was I had this mentor who used to own this silkscreen company. Like, my very first job was cleaning screens at a silkscreen place. I worked there in Burger King. But his name's Fred Jackson, and Fred Jackson created this comic club called American Fun. And at first, you know, I'm 14. I'm thinking a comic club was a bunch of geeks sitting around talking about, you know, Jack Kirby's better than John Buscema. You know, like, that's what I thought it was. But when I went to my first American Fun Comics meeting, Fred said, "Okay, it's time to do orders." And he distributed these sheets with pencils, and he had essentially previews, right?
Oh, cool.
And I said, "What are we doing?" He goes, We're ordering our comics." And I said, What do you mean? Because I had just started going to a comic book store. And I said, "What do you mean we're ordering comics?" He goes, "Look around the room. We have enough people that we are enough for Diamond to recognize us at a store." And he put his hand on my back. He goes, "Welcome to getting your books at 45% off." And I was like,
"Yeah,
are you fucking kidding?" And I was like, I'm like going through the catalog. I'll take this and I'll take this. But that's what we did. Like, we were a comic club. We weren't even a retail store. We just had enough numbers to qualify.
To buy in volume.
Yeah, to buy in volume. And that's how I ended up working at Diamond, because I would go with Fred to Diamond to pick up our orders, you know. But
it's
that
networking. It's networking.
but
Guys,
that's how
it's
I
a good
learned.
thing to think about is network.
Yeah, it was the first time I learned. I'm like, oh, that's how stores can make money, and like that's how they. But yeah, it was crazy, like learning about that.
So we know it now. Talking about like, one of since brought up Jeppy. After he was on that interview with Dan Shaheen
Mm.
and retailers, I started looking up more prior videos that he'd done, more interviews he had done, and just to kind of see a little bit more on him because he's an interesting guy. He's very charismatic. He's very controversial too, because I guess what I've gotten from him and why he's so controversial is he's always seemed incredibly powerful. Like his yes or his no seems like it's very, very weighty.
Right.
And in a way, Ethan Van Sciver is kind of like that. Like Ethan can say yes or no, and Ethan will say like, well, he can't tell anybody what to do. But Ethan, because he's built up such a huge platform, he has a lot of power, and it's well earned and well deserved. But he's just a man like anybody else, and he's been very generous and very fair with.
Well, he's got great taste.
Me.
That's the thing too. Like when it comes to someone that's a tastemaker, we rely on them. Like you know what I'm saying? Like
he knows kind of where everybody fits,
right?
But he never keeps anybody down. Like
right.
anywhere you want to go, it's fine, but you better do it with merit. That's fine.
Right.
Absolutely. So you just respect the game, and then you can respect all the players. But one of the things Steve Jeppy said that was really interesting about the uniqueness of comics was he was doing a speech and he was talking to retailers about how amazing comics are, just so positive, so interesting. He was talking about how we've got competition from TV, competition from movies, video games. He's like, but there's nothing like comics where you have no other medium that really engages the imagination. And like we were talking about between panels, it doesn't engage the imagination. Like characters all have their own voices. Well, how does Spider-Man sound? Well, I know when I read Spider-Man, he sounds a certain way to me. When Dan FRAGA reads Spider-Man, he reads a certain way to Dan. But the same as all the other characters, of course, in the book, and we may not even think about it, but it's kind of our relatability to the content that when we're reading comics, we just give that person a voice and we engage with that person, even on a deeper level. It's just that was I hadn't heard that kind of either. I mean, of course, no one's talking when I'm reading the comic,
right.
But it's just something else that hits. But
there's other parts of comics too. I was having a discussion. Donald DeLay was
I love him
about it. Yeah, he's great. I just no holes barred.
Donald say what he's got to say.
Yeah, he was talking about that digital won't ever take the place, and somebody was like, "Oh yeah, digital will," and I don't see how digital won't. And I chimed in. I said, "Listen, I don't." And maybe I'm being completely subjective here, but I feel like I speak for a lot of people. The physical comic is as much a part of the culture as the comic, what's inside the comic, the physical comic. I'm not even talking about the tangibility and, smelling the pages and that sort of thing. What I'm talking about is we collect. Part of it is collecting. If you have, 5 comics and there needs to be 6, you feel like you need that 6th one, and it feels good to see all of them. It's a very satisfying feeling. There's also the other thing that I really enjoy, and again, this is super subjective, but I use Moon Knight 55, Stephen Platt's first Moon Knight, as an example of this. When I saw that comic, I was like, oh damn, and I bought like 10 copies because I was like, I know this is going to be the shit. Like I felt kind of like a small investor,
Yeah, that was another thing we could do in comics is like you can kind of speculate.
Yeah, you could be a speculator. Obviously, when it gets out of control, we get like the Spawn 1, X-Men 1, Spider-Man 1 situation.
And straight up, I don't think Spawn 1's the problem as much as like Turok 1 or some of the other books that like there really is no demand.
Oh, that's has enough time gone by where we can talk about Wizard magazine?
Yeah, we can talk about Gareb. We can talk about Gareb and Wizard.
Yeah, Gareb.
But to what you were saying,
Valiant, yeah.
We used to do. I knew where you were going to go. I feel like I knew where you were going to go with this. But you're talking about the saving aspect. Yeah. With Triumphant Comics, it was a line of science fiction color comics. We did We only did about 50 issues from all 6 titles, but
Yeah.
that's because the market went the other way on us, and it's hard publishing a line of a comic universe. But we did Chromium Man, Scavengers, another called Dr. Chaos, and our thing was we were like the collector's universe. Unfortunately, I came out and we serially numbered each of the books, so like every book was physically unique.
Yeah.
And it was read, save, collect. So it's like you'd read the comics, you'd enjoy them, you read them, you would save them, and then you would also kind of collect them as a collector of like, hey, I've got this, and maybe it goes up in value or something like that.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like we're gonna go all over the place, but I used to do these things called mind maps. I don't know if you've ever seen a mind map.
No, I've never seen a mind map.
Look it up. It's created by this guy named Tony Buzan, and you take a concept, and there are branches that come off of the concept with little nuggets and branches that come off of those, and like it's a way to like visually conceptualize something. So that's what I'm doing in my head as we talk.
Yeah, man.
But
whatever strikes you.
Yeah. Just going back into different aspects of comics, and you were talking about how did working in Hollywood and animation help comics afterwards, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's interesting.
One of the main things that has really helped me, especially now that I've returned to comics after 17 years, was working for Mattel. I worked for Mattel for almost 6 years, and I worked in the content division. So it was up to us to take a product that didn't exist, that wasn't even in the Zeitgeist at all. No kid had ever seen it, and
not even a concept.
Not even a concept. And I'd live with that concept for a year and a half with my team, and we would cultivate it, and we would meet with marketing and all this stuff. And you would see like how to get it out into the idea sphere where kids go, oh, this is a thing. And it's, you don't just go, and what made me think of it is when you said the read, save, collect.
Yeah.
If it was one of those things where if you had a product and you're like, here's your product, this is what you do with it, let me be prescriptive, and this is that. Sometimes that won't work at all. A lot of what ends up making something sink or swim is discovery. It's like discovering that band that nobody likes, and you have a t-shirt and you have to explain it to people, and then they get involved, and next thing you know, your band is doing stadium shows. It's like that sort of buildup, and people like that. People like the journey. Like I always say in regard to the Matrix movies, I like number 1 the best because the story of becoming Neo was much more interesting than being Neo.
Oh, sure.
So I think when you market something, you always want that person they want more. They want to find out more. You don't always give them the show. But I learned that by working at Mattel, and they have all this experience, and a lot of the stuff was big surprise to me. I'm like, why wouldn't you do this? And they'd say, well, if we do this, this, and this, then it'll lead to this, and it'll feel natural. Shit.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot. I learned a lot while working at Mattel in that regard, and I try to bring that to my storytelling. When people get Black Flag and they get my storytelling, I'm breadcrumbing the fuck out of that thing, like in a way where it won't be completely apparent, but by the time they get to issue 3 and go back and look at issue 1, it's going to be some of that M. Night Shyamalan shit where they're like, he was dead the whole time. Nobody dead the whole time in my book, but I'm using it as an example.
Sweet setups,
yeah. But we do that.
Cool.
We should do that in marketing too. We should do that in the cultivation of everything. And I know I'm going all around the place here, but going back.
Everybody loves it, and I'm a great interrupter. That's one of my strongest skill sets. I'd interrupt you, brother, if it was but I'm just interested to hear what you have to say next on whatever the hell it is that we're talking about.
Yeah, what I found, and this was something that when comic books were at, again, their apex, when I think about guys like Jim Lee, and I think about guys like Rob Liefeld, what some people don't know is that there were a lot of guys behind the scenes helping out. So, for example, Jim Lee drew a certain way. When he did Samurai Santa, he drew a certain way. When he did Alpha Flight, he drew a certain way. When Carl Potts came along, he said to Jim, dude, let me show you Kevin Nolan. Let me show you Mike Mignola. Let me show you some, some European stuff. I know for a fact Bob Harris was giving, and Bob Harris was another good editor. Bob Harris was giving Jim copies of Barry Windsor Smith's Weapon X a year before it ever saw print.
Wow.
So
what an amazing book.
Yeah, all that cross-hatching Jim was learning. But you had these editors that were like, they were there nurturing, and Rob Liefeld had Mike Carlin. Mike Carlin, who's a great editor over at DC, was also very nurturing. And you find that these guys definitely benefited from it. And going over to Image and at Extreme, we didn't have that, and it was sort of a little bit crazy. One of the things that happened that is unfortunate, like some people said, like we have a house style, everybody does it, but there was never a house style mandated. What it was is this sort of feeling of not wanting to be left behind. And this is like, if I had to give advice to, if there's any artists in our chat, this is my advice. You can't be truthful if you're chasing outside of yourself, and I'm speaking from experience. When I was at Extreme, and Jeff Matsuda, one of the really cool guys, he came in and he had a way of drawing shines on shoulder pads and metal that was unique to Jeff, but everybody was so dazzled by it, and you felt like, well, nobody's dazzled by mine, I better make my shines better, right? So then you start working on your shines, and then Stephen Platt comes into the studio and he's putting debris on everything flying off, and you see Rob start to copy it, and you're like, oh, well, I better do that too, or my shit's not going to be cool. And next thing you know, your artwork's a Frankenstein monster. It's not. It doesn't even recognize the truth of what's in your soul, because I was busy, and I'm just saying, as an artist, you're busy chasing something outside of yourself, that you lose sight of the fact that you're an individual and the truth you have is worth telling. But if you spend your time chasing, you're going to start hating drawing, because you're going to know you're lying the whole time stylistically. And that's my advice.
What's the engine though? What do you need? So, I started drawing and then stopped drawing when I was like, started drawing when I was like 7 or 8, stopped drawing when I was like 12, and, inspired by comics. And then I just didn't put the time into it. I didn't have enough of the passion for it. But when someone wants to do work, of course they're going to look outside themselves. Do they need the disciplines first of like, look, you need to know your anatomy. You need to, before you start looking at style, do you need to know, what basics do you need to know? Like, how do you know when you're ready to say, like, listen, this is all going to come from me? It's not
the best question ever, right? The first thing you need to have is a point of view. And when I was coming up, my favorites were John Byrne, Frank Miller, Todd McFarlane, Art Adams, Rob Liefeld, and Jim Lee. Like, those are the guys that really got me going, because inside my head, the pictures I was seeing inside my head were more on the cartoony side and less on the realistic side. Like, I like Neil Adams, but I never wanted to draw like Neil Adams. And I liked Kevin Nolan, but I never wanted to draw like Kevin Nolan. I knew that my tendencies were cartoony. So it's an interesting question, because you would never learn how to play the piano without listening to other people play the piano, so obviously you want to have influences. I think what you need to do is that it's procedural, but there's also a lot of things that need to happen at the same time. So, for example, what I would recommend to anybody is to do what I call a breakdown. Like, if you take someone like Jim Lee, and you take him for like his style, and not knocking Jim, but his style kind of stopped at a certain year. Like, you get the same Jim over the last 10 years that it's like a McDonald's hamburger. Like, it's solid, it's this, but there was a point in where you could see his growth. You could see his growth from Punisher War Journal into X-Men, into Uncanny X-Men, into regular X-Men, into Wildcats. You can see him grow. And when you dissect him down, you go, his early stuff was influenced by Kevin Nolan, Mike Mignola, John Byrne.
So when you're dissecting down, you're looking at a creator's earliest work, and then a little later, and then a little later, because you're following the process of evolution,
right?
And you're observing the influences,
right? But you also, and this is why I say you have to do things in tandem, have a strong understanding of why they're making those choices. It's not. I always say the answer isn't in the what, it's in the why, right? So a lot of Jim Lee's early stuff, if you look at it, he was checking out George Bridgman. George Bridgman has a book called The Complete Guide to Drawing from Life. It's also broken down in Constructive Anatomy and the Human Machine. Turn of the century art teacher who had this really strong book on anatomy, and he teaches you anatomy in a very volumetric, sort of solid way, where you look at someone like an Andrew Loomis who has a softer style that lends itself more to Steve Root and Alex Ross. You look at someone like Bern Hogarth, and they're a little more like Joe Quesada, Todd McFarlane. But you check these things out, and you learn about the mechanics of the why of things. So when you're looking at Jim Lee, you're not just looking at the surface line. He does it like this, and the cross hatching goes like this.
That's what he does.
That's what he does. You have to understand why. You're realizing, oh, these volumes relate to each other, and the human machine is a certain way. Like when I move my arms forward, my collarbones do this, and my scapula goes back. When I do this, my scapula gets compressed. That's why Jim Lee is doing what he does. In that particular pose. Like when you see a twist, another one that's a crazy one is that your pinky and elbow line up no matter which way, if you're shooting a gun or whatever. So it drives me crazy when I see someone shoot a gun and they have the elbow up here when it should be down here. It's just little things like that. So you look at those things in tandem. Obviously, you want to see how other people are doing things and make your choices for yourself, almost like a all-you-can-eat buffet. Oh, I like Jim Lee's poses. I like Todd McFarlane's page design. I like Rob Liefeld's intensity. I like so-and-so's lighting. That's who I am. But one of the most important things that I read as a kid was there was an interview by Todd McFarlane, and it was in Comics Interview, right? And the interviewer asks, what made you come up with the way you draw Spider-Man? And he said, I was thinking about the way Ditko drew Spider-Man, but without ever looking at Ditko. Okay? He was trying to consider his impression of Ditko without looking at Ditko. And his recollection was bigger eyes, more webbing, more black in the costume, the underarm stuff. Obviously, he hijacked the Michael Golden spaghetti webbing. And then the poses came from the idea of, if he's called Spider-Man, all these other artists put the emphasis on the word man. I'm going to put the word emphasis on the word spider. So I'm going to make him more creepy crawly. And when you think about that, you go, clearly it had its roots and it had its inspiration, but it was filtered through his truth, which was a recollection. And that's how he got to have his original voice.
That was his point of view.
That was his point of view. But like I said, the Frankenstein monster is the people that have 20 comic books opened up and they're trying to do shit. You have to realize, like, you can't Frankenstein shit. You have to, like, study it, observe it, ask the why, apply it to your own stuff.
That's how you develop your point of view, but you want those basic skills down. And I guess as any kind of creative person, anybody who learns a discipline, who does a job, that whenever you start doing something, it's not the end. You're not an expert, and you can always keep learning and do different things. But when you kind of know your basics or you don't know your basics. So before you have a point of view, you want to know your basics. No, that's
it. That if we summed it up, that would be it. And also, like, the other thing, there was a Arnold Schwarzenegger movie called Stay Hungry.
Yeah.
And, that is an attitude that I have. Like, when I see something, I'm an old dog that can learn new tricks. About 7.5 years ago, I saw this Korean artist named Kim Jong-gi. And what impressed me about him, outside of the fact that he drew these really, wide angle lens scenes that had multiple perspectives, but everything was accurate, is that he just drew them straight in with a pen. He would just go, like, no guidelines, nothing. He would just create these scenes as if he was a human printer, or if he was tracing a reality. And I remember seeing that and thinking, number one, it's a trick. Like that, my first idea was it's a trick. There's light pencils there, you know, whatever. Then it turned to, well, he's a fucking mutant, you know, like, you know, it went there. And then it went to, no, he's a human being. And I need to ask myself, what is it about me that is preventing me from being able to do this and preventing me from comprehending this? And I very systematically wrote a list. You know, I said, I don't have a strong enough visual vocabulary. The images I see in my head don't last long enough for me to capture them in the way he's doing it. Sometimes even if something's in front of me, what I see and what I draw aren't necessarily the same. And then the other thing, and this is another common one, is being married to the results of something. It's that stage fright. You know, if it isn't perfect, you know, it's going to fucking suck, and people are going to judge me, and, you know, whatever. So those were the things. So I systematically went through each of those things and was like, I need to destroy the fact that I don't have a strong enough visual vocabulary. I need to figure out a way to hack my brain so that I can hold images in my mind. I need to calibrate my mind's eye with my hand so I can draw the things that I'm seeing. And then also I need to get away from the idea that, like, it has to be perfect. So I did that. It took me about maybe 6 months, and then I was able to do the thing that he did.
Wow.
But what I found, especially with the one with holding images in my head, was that it went beyond holding images. I could hold sequences. I could do, like, when I play chess or do freestyle rap,
Wow.
I could actually, it's like time travel, right? Like, you can basically write an essay in your head, and when you're publicly speaking, you could go through that essay as if it existed without ever writing a word down, you know? So it translated beyond that.
So once you learned that discipline for that art, you were able to translate that to
everything.
rap and other things. Wow.
Everything. Whenever when I did my promo video for Black Flag, where I plant the bullets and make them grow, I literally saw it in my head finished, and I said, okay, I'm going to need to go buy bullets. I need to shoot this on the green screen. Like, I literally wrote myself a grocery list of what I needed to do to accomplish it, because it was already there, you know? And so that's something that I would like. I call it the free flow drawing system. It's something that I feel like, if I could teach that fundamentally to people, even at their very beginning, almost like if it was kindergarten, like, it seems like it's an advanced idea, but it's really not. It's something like I said, it's kindergarten level creativity. And I feel like if somebody had these skills and use them as assets to then go on and study using the checklist that I have for observation, running ideas through their head, like, imagine doing a character design, going, that's what it looks like with a cape. That's what it looks like with a hat. That's what it looks. Okay. Oh, that's what it looks like brown. Okay, I'm going to do it. And you're basically running drafts instantly through your head, and then you go and you lay them down.
Yeah, we should capture that in a bottle.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't diminish the importance of it. You know, process things like that, sequencing, figuring out processing. Semi-related, Kirk Lindo, thank you for the comment, Kirk. Kirk used to run my studio at Personality Comics back in the day.
Yeah.
And I loved comics, but I didn't know how to we published J. Jackrabbits, took a couple of years off, and then I dropped out of college to publish comics again, and started with pretty much nothing, and hired Kirk part-time, and we started to build a freelance people. We were publishing through comic stores. That's why, you know, Jeppy paid my bills for a long time with, you know, distributing the comics and doing all that, and paying us out like everybody, you know, the distributors as well. And then we got a physical office space eventually. And Kirk was in Will Eisner's school, and awesome. Kirk learned from him. And then Kirk also later managed retail shoe stores. Like he was a trainer and stuff like that. So he used to dealing with people and kind of corralling them. So when it comes to process, I know we would hire people like practically off the street, you know, who wanted to be artists, some that were artists, some people that had like checkered history with the law, and variety of things like that. And actually, Adam Polina was one of the guys who came to our studio. He's super talent, super talent. He did Chromium Man for us, one of my favorite books. But Kirk was just going through processes with them all the time about like, all right, this is how you're going to do 3 pages a day. You know, this is how I want you doing your layouts. This is how you're going to use this template for storytelling, basically, to just save time. We had one guy in the studio who would just erase all the pages for the pencilers so that process would go faster. Kirk was just reminding me of that the other day. And there's a lot people can gain out of those processes, and it's definitely worth, you know, nailing them down and figuring out like, all right, how do we turn this into a product, or how do we get it out to people to let them know about it? Future of comic. Oh, did you finish what you were going to say about that?
Done, man. I'm done.
I'm done. Cool. Yeah. So future of comics wise, this is one of the things I was thinking about is, number one, no questions asked. Crowdfunding as a concept is definitely a big part of the future of comics.
Absolutely.
And not just like Comicsgate necessarily, just the premise of future buyers saying, hey, we want to buy these comics before they're produced, where we get those commitments. And like we've been doing since comic book stores in the late 70s, early 80s, collecting those orders so we knew what our commitments were. Yeah. Direct to consumer, like us selling comics to our fans like we do through Indiegogo and we do through Comicsgate, and we're doing right now on Black Flag. Everybody back Black Flag. And of course, I'm doing College of the Dead, cranking along. There's College of the Dead. Love this book. Getting tremendous support on this one. I really appreciate it. But the whole concept of selling direct to consumer through crowdfunding, it has to exist in the future. Yeah. It would make no sense for it to not exist in the future. Now, the idea of selling to retail stores, you know, there's been a lot of retail stores that gave early Comicsgate guys a hard time, like ridiculous hard time. Ethan had all sorts of trouble. Richard Meyer all sorts of trouble. We don't appreciate that. And people should be held accountable for whatever they did. But at the same time, you know, is it going to be, we know it's going to be crowdfunding. Is it going to be, you know, physical books? Is it going to be floppies? Is it going to be trade paperbacks, hardcovers? Is it going to be digital? You know, is it going to be all of those things? Some direct to consumer, some, you know, through stores that resell it, some returnable, some non-returnable. What's your gut feeling? Yes, no, only a couple of those things.
I have my answer again. I'm just going to say is super subjective. I make my decisions based on the information I know. I see models out there that work. You know, we talked about this on my stream or somebody's stream
For sure.
recently. But number one, it's expanding the customer base. Like right now, we're dealing with a lot of 25 to 60-year-olds. We need to start getting the kids involved. There's that. We need to bring new blood in as a business, and also, you know, and I'm not saying cater your stories, don't age them down, because kids aren't dumb. You know, Dark Knight came out when I was 12 years old and I loved it, you know, and I was reading Watchmen when I was 12 and I totally understood it. So, you know, you don't have to age down for kids. You need to talk to the kids where they are. Yes, they are on their tablets and they're on their phones, but that doesn't mean digital is the way. That's just the way you inform them. You know, where are they? They're here on YouTube. They're on TikTok. They're through apps. They play apps and video games. Sometimes it could be as simple as buying an ad design for a kid that pops in on some of these games. So talk to developers and advertise your comic through those developers. Talk to the kids where the kids are. So that's stage one. Stage two is communicating the way that your customer, whether it's a kid or it could be an in-app purchase. We don't know. The direct to consumer could be as simple as an in-app purchase that their parents.
We can have a free Black Flag GI Jackrabbits app game that's an in-app purchase for a comic or whatever.
That's right, exactly. It's or it's something that they achieve, right? It's an achievement. Like my kids play these games where they're going after these achievements, but there's these other purchases involved to get those achievements. So they end up spending $20 and buying these fake jewels that exist in the game. But
Yeah.
what if there was something at the end of this, like a physical copy of something? These are all like out of the box ideas that I think about in my head as far as how to get to kids. As far as the market itself, I believe that digital has its place, but I'm of the mind that much like the music business, you should be willing to give away content. And what that means is old back issue stuff, right? Someone who's new, it's a little harder. Maybe you create a free digital something that is exclusive as a digital. I myself gave away the first 5 issues of the Black Flag series from the 90s, as well as another series called The Gear Station. And that's because I want people to check my shit out. You know, I want them to be up to speed on things. And if they like it, they got free comics. If they don't like it, they can delete it. I feel like digital isn't really something that
it's not something you're worried about right now. See, because you know what I'm starting to like, it's starting to hit me, Dan, is I'm thinking like what Comicsgate has the most of is like the fire and the enthusiasm and the connection with the consumer. You know, we're not corporate comics. You know, we are doing our passion projects.
We're dreamers.
And right, we're dreamers. We're passionate people. We're making our books. We're working hard at it. We're appreciating people. We're doing it for the love. And we're also hoping to make money. And we're in that too. But it's like life choice, making comics, hardcore comics. So the core of what we're doing is crucial because, yeah, you can have corporate comics doing Spider-Man and whatever, Batman and passionate artists that jump on those, whatever it is. But the fire is always really with the creators and the people who are passionate about the original stuff. So the question is not so much, do we sell to comic stores? Do we have trades that like freaking Walking Dead, you know, with all its curses in the comics and whatnot. I remember being surprised a couple of years ago, seeing their omnibus books being sold through Walmart. Would I have a problem with, you know, Graduation Day being sold or, you know, 3 collected books being sold by Walmart with them cursing? Would I care if Amazon, like, you know what? Yeah, you want to buy them and pay for them. God bless you, man. So, you know, buy them and sell them. Yeah. So I think, but I think what we're doing direct to consumer, that's really everything. That's the core. What we have to figure out is who else can we partner with that can make it easy for us to do more things? Like you were talking about Gap apps and in-game purchases and things like that. Yeah. There's got to be app developers that would love to do a Black Flag, you know, and
yeah, I think, well, my whole thing is I think everything is sort of procedural. And I had an old friend that wanted to help me out with business, and we've since parted ways because he couldn't get around his head. He wanted Disney. I always use Disneyland as the example.
Sure, man.
He wanted Disneyland today, and it goes back to the thing I was telling you earlier, where if you tell people what to do without setting it up to make them want it, it's fruitless. But he wanted Disneyland. He's like, we need to have a Disneyland. And I said, dude, without Snow White, without Pinocchio, without these movies, and without all those Mickey Mouse shorts, Disneyland means jack shit. You need to have all those things. So what I'm talking about is coming towards this procedurally. It's not like I snap my fingers like Thanos and all the infrastructure happens. It's procedural. So, for example, I look at things around me, the observations that, like I say, I make my decisions on what I see. I see guys like Polito who puts out these things via crowdfund, very nice, square-bound, prestige, 48-page books. The crowd, the fans get them. He then has a little bit of gestation time, offers them as 2 issues through Diamond to the stores, and he gets a whole different market. Those aren't the same fans, right? So there's that model, right? Just a very simple one.
Very straightforward.
Crowdfund it, vault it for 6 months, put it out through the store. So there's that business model. Then there's also the one of, hey, these 48 pagers, there's actually 4 of them. Those two go together into a trade. Let's go get deals with brick and mortar places that still exist, like a Barnes and Noble, and get those in there. Also talk with Amazon and get those in there. We could crowdfund them as well, but I think every format has its place.
For different channels, yeah.
The end goal for me is to get, obviously, I think enough of my ideas that I'm going to sit there all day long and draw something and create something. That's how much I care, which means I want it in as many hands as possible. I want little kids and I want grandmas. And I want grandmas to be appalled, but I want little kids to be excited. I want it.
Your grandmas to be appalled.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! Did you see what that monkey did? That
monkey with a giant gun.
Yeah. Have you seen? I want a sidebar. Have you seen those videos going around with the little monkeys on motorcycles, like kidnapping children?
No.
Oh, dude,
we could do a whole show on that.
It's scary to me, man. It's scary.
They grabbing up kids on monkeys on motorcycles.
Yeah, the sex trade people have trained these little monkeys on mini bikes to run up on these mini bikes, snatch kids, and run off with them. It's incredible. But sorry, I'm sidebarring. You want to get?
What do you mean? That's not related to what we're talking about?
No, that has nothing to do with comics.
You were talking about getting to the kids.
Yeah,
that's not what you meant, though.
That's not. I did not want to get.
But if we had enough monkeys on motorcycles, we could get those kids.
I would have them distribute comic books.
They would be, yeah, those monkeys on motorcycles distributing books.
But also the other thing too is I think we need to reduce as much division as possible, because I see a lot of that out there, and I see the other side trying to create divisions. Retailers are our friends. I know retailers are my friend. A lot of those guys I saw on Dan's show, Joe Field, Cliff Biggers.
Yeah,
those are friends of mine, like actual friends, like
real people that you know and
that I know, and I shop at their shops. Brian Hibbs, not a fan, but whatever. He never loved Image Comics anyway. But Joe and Cliff, those guys, that I figure we need to embrace them and have them included in part of this picture. And if they want to get in, there's ideas that if they want to get in on some of the crowdfund stuff, to have retailer bundles, like if they want to have that special.
Well, you know what? There's a guy, and he was in our chat earlier. I think it was in this chat. He was in your chat. He might have been in my chat here too, I think. A fan of yours, the #1 Marvel fan retailer guy.
Yeah, he's great.
So he's the first. It's funny because, I don't know. I used to think I was really creative. I guess I can be really creative, but he found a way to tie crowdfunding, your crowdfunder, Black Flag, to his success in his retail store without even doing a transaction with you in any way. And the way he did it was, he told his customers and on his social media, I guess, as well, whoever shows me they back Black Flag on Indiegogo will get a special discount at my store.
Right. That's
effing amazing.
Cool, that's super cool. And
effing amazing.
I feel like I want to reward that. I don't know how, but I think that's terrific.
I want to know who that, if you're listening, Adam Post Media Group at gmail.com. It's also probably in the at Comics We Love. Let's connect to who you are, so we can find a way to send you something and thank you, but also ask you if you have any other great ideas and what you actually did, and kind of understand it. Because there's got to be. I look at it this way too: is like comic book stores. There are a bunch of them that's going to go out of business. That's fine if they go out of business. Somehow they always keep popping up. There are new ones. There are also big mail order retail operations that are never going to go out of business, or not for a very, very long time, like Midtown Comics and DCBS that were so successful. They were able to get the direct distribution deals with DC and create their own distributorships. I don't know if it was Zach who said it or someone else who was credible, but they were like, Midtown Comics is like 20% of the comics market, what they buy. And DCBS is probably, I'll ask Steve Jeppy, maybe he'll tell me. DCBS is like 10 or 15%. I got to imagine. I've heard they were the biggest account that Diamond had. So, but between the two of them, if they're buying a third of the comics market, they're not going anywhere so fast.
Right.
Is there a way that we can work with retail stores? maybe, I know like a lot of guys have like 10 packs or retailer sets or whatever, they could resell them. So that's a way, through the crowdfunding, but also, maybe there is a way that, see, I got this from watching Jeppy too. He's so freaking excited and enthusiastic about comics. Like, he's a 70-year-old man, and he's like, comic books are magical in this way, and they're great. And like, here's what's good, and he's just like so positive. Like, well, what his positivity is unique in many ways, but it's definitely unique to like business, the comics business. I'm sure the retailers, but Ethan has that.
Yeah.
You have it. I have it. I got to let it out more, but I feel that way. I have it too. And there's others of us, that have that. That enthusiasm creates business. It creates opportunity. That is what gets people excited about comics. Yeah. That's good for comic stores, even if the comic store isn't able to retail College of the Dead right now or Black Flag or whatever. But if there's excitement that's going into that comic store in some way, that comic store is going to do more business. They're going to do better. And like Steve was saying the other day, he was like, hey, retailers, when you get the comics, like make sure when you're reopening, you want to tell people like, hey, great news. Comics are back, like really just like be excited. Like when he was talking about when he was a kid and he would get the new comics, or even as a young man reselling comics, they would cut the twine or whatever to get the comics when they first came out, and how exciting it was to actually get a hold of them. Yeah. He's like, that's you guys, you're getting the new comics, so not chastising them or anything, just reminding them like you control that experience for so many people that were so passionate about comic books.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, man. Earlier I talked about this concept called the mind map, right?
Yeah. I opened it on the side.
Yeah. And when we look at sort of how we integrate with a retailer, I feel like it's almost sort of myopic. And I don't mean that in like a derogatory way. I just mean
limited, small.
It's very limited. And we can do this with the retailer, and this would work, and this, that, and the other. But one of the things that I know that when I pull back, I go, the problem is bigger than that, right? The problem is, and we talked about this on the other show, is that there's a glut of garbage, right? If I'm a retailer, and I always use round numbers, and I have $100, they have more than that, but let's say I have $100 a month, and the big two take up, let's say DC takes 40, and Marvel takes 40, and my Funko Pops take 10, and then all my indie books take 10. But let's say Marvel goes, nah, we got this fucking crazy, goes through all of the titles thing, and you got to buy 10 of each title to get these exclusive things. Well, shit, now I got to give Marvel 50. Where am I going to take that? I'll take 5 from Funko Pops. I'll take 5 from indies to make sure that works. It's like imagine you have a finite amount of poker chips in a grid, and you have to put them in those slots. Well, now I got to take from this to put this in. So as much as we want them to have partnerships with them, there's these other publishers that are doing this shitty, like I just say, it's fucking shitty, short-sighted business where they're jamming shit down the retailer's throat that they can't sell for a bottom line of these shareholders. So they're very much part of the problem. I'm not saying they're the enemy, they're the devil. I'm saying we need to, again, look at this thing as a mind map globally, right? So there's that issue, right? Because we definitely want to be friendly with retailers. The other thing we can do, I had this conversation on Uncle E's stream this morning or this afternoon. Biggins was on there too.
I saw a slice.
That we were talking about image, right? And how image works, the image deal. My image deal was the same as everybody else's image deal. It's that image will get you into the Diamond catalog. They will pay for your printing up front. They'll pay for your letters up front. They'll pay for your colors up front. You have to take care of your writing, your penciling, your inking. Then when your orders come in, they subtract printing. They subtract all of the fees they paid, and then you pay them for all of their service. You pay Image Comics a flat fee of $2,500 for every issue you make. Okay, this is why Liefeld was kicked out of Image, because he resisted this. he was doing, let's say he was doing 10 books. He was kicking 25 grand into the kitty, where Eric Larson, who did 1 book, was only contributing 2,500 to the kitty. And Rob felt it wasn't fair, and they were pissed, and they said, fuck you, Rob. So that ended up happening. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is I try to think about getting, what made me think of this is when you said, Jeppy was excited. Comic books are great. Comic books are bad. Comic books are this. Somebody somewhere needs to decide, and whether it's the big publishers, whether it's Diamond, whether it's a co-op with Diamond and retailers, whatever, if there was some sort of fund, not unlike the comic book legal defense fund, but one that was like, hey, we need to buy ads. We need to buy YouTube ads. We need to buy ads where people that read comics are. And, you know, I'm of the mind, like, what's wrong with, like, let's say you and I, Adam, you and I said, hey, you know what, dude, between us, I'm going to kick 1,000 in, and you say I'm going to kick 1,000 in, and we go, hey, let's do a College of the Dead Black Flag ad campaign. Yeah. And we'll take that $1,000 and we'll get it on Instagram as a sponsored ad. We'll get it on YouTube as a sponsored ad. And maybe what we'll do in the regions we know, because we have the statistics of who and where our people are coming from, we go and we get a couple of local spots that say, you know, this, and you just, it's a $2,000 investment, and you go do that. Nobody does that. Nobody is putting that kind of investment in.
Yeah, Marvel used to have co-op advertising. I don't know if they ever stopped it. They probably stopped it, including paying for signs. Like if you put Spider-Man in your sign and jazz like that. I definitely have some questions for Jeppy. My take on what's happened to retailers has been they've been getting more and more screwed over since the 1980s. Since Marvel was acquired, and then they got really aggressive with their retail prices, because comics used to be like $1, $1.25. Yeah. And then Ronald Perlman, who owned Marvel, figured out, like, or whoever his guy was, figured out, hey, we can just continuously jack up the prices. The problem being that and putting out multiple titles and putting out weaker titles and so on and so on. But mostly on the price point, like the retailer is in a position where it's not a good business. No, you know, there's some people that make some money, and there's some brilliant people. Like obviously the Midtown Comics guys are sharp because they're making money hand over fist, and they figured out what to do. Chuck Rosansky makes a lot of money. And he's got millions. Good for him. He's amazing contributor to the industry. Buddy Saunders has a very successful business. But all the guys who do well have these business models where it's mail order. You know, it's not like they have retail stores, or Chuck still has at least one major retail store. But it's also a warehouse for his mail order. Yeah. Midtown Comics obviously has retail stores as well, but they do a huge percentage of their business mail order, where they don't have that kind of, overhead and expense. And they also use the new comics as a loss leader. DCBS, I'm not quite sure what they're doing. I don't know if they have back issues or not. I know Midtown has back issues. Chuck has back issues. But Midtown, Chuck, and Buddy Saunders with mycomicshop.com. They buy comics by the truckloads, liquidated comics by the truckloads. Yeah. So such that when they pay for the freight, I know Chuck Rosansky was talking about this in a video. When he pays for the freight, when he's cleaned out some warehouses of unsold comics and whatever other dealers and stuff he's buying out from, the freight for the shipping is more than he has to pay for the comics in most cases. Nice. So that's how he's able to make money. That's how he's able to be like, well, now I'm selling that thing retail for $2 or $5 or $30. It's literally all profit except for the labor to put it in a bag and to, stock it.
These are outliers, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're outliers. It's not a typical retail store. So my thing, they're buying out liquidated retail stores. Their million is somebody else's bankruptcy in many cases, unfortunately. But and that's a business all to itself. But that's not normal. That's not normal business. Not everybody can be the vulture. Not everybody can.
We want healthy, dude, and
we want healthy. So how? So someone's got to look at that comic book store retailer's business model. Yeah. And figure out, like, if the physical retail store is going to exist, how do you turn that into a great business? Well, how does that become a great business?
We talked about this already, and Like I said, for me, I think it's 3 stages. It's number one is the where the buck stops, which is the customer, right? We
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that their experience is great, that we're giving them thorough value, and we don't want to gouge them. We want to make sure that we give them every dime's worth, right? So there's that. Now, with a retailer, we want to make sure that there's enough of a margin there that it's worth their sale, but there's got to be a sweet spot. And what ended up happening, and what made me think of this, is when you said comics used to be like a buck something, you know, $1.25. Like when I started collecting, I think they were 45 cents. But I remember when they went up to $1, and when I worked at Image, we charged $1.95, which was expensive at the time because we had nicer paper. But it was $1.95. It was a $2 book, and
That's maximum for independents back in
yeah,
the day.
that was a pricey book.
Oh no, actually no. Sorry to interrupt, but maximum for independents was like $2.95
Right,
for independents, but $1.95 for mainstream independent. Yeah, that was about the top of it.
right. So, but that price point, and again, we're talking $1992. That particular price point was good for everyone. It was good for the customer, it was good for the retailer, and it was good for the publisher. Like you said, somebody got greedy and said, let's just, like a frog in a pot of water, let's turn up the heat until we cook them,
Yeah.
like slowly. Now we got $8.99 books. Nobody can afford them. And I never feel like I got my money's worth. I can go get a DVD for $8.99 and get the
Dan, it's so severe now. And if I do talk to Jeppy, this is what I'm going to talk to him about is, what do you do with the industry now that maybe 50% of all comics are probably bought mail order rather than through the physical comic store? They're all bought deep discounted. So you have this weird group of customers who for probably the last 20 years or more have been buying mail order comics, just more and more and more, where their price point is not the same as anyone walking into a retail store. So if they're an $8.99 comic, but not if you buy it through Chuck Rosansky or Buddy Saunders, or
well, this is where everybody wins, dude. Imagine this. Let's say that right now they're getting their $4.99 comic for $2. I'm using fake numbers here, but let's say they're getting their $4.99 comic for $2. And the reason they're getting it for $2 is because these stores are dying and they're selling to Chuck for 75 cents, and he's able to sell it for $2, and that's how he's making his money, even though it was a $4 book, whatever. But here's the win. If you find that sweet spot, there's more healthy retail stores. So now they're able to make money at a good price point, and the mail order person who's used to buying their books at $2 are still getting their book at $2. Maybe they're not feeling, if they're caught up on I'm used to getting it for 50% off, and they're caught up on that, then that's their own subjective issue. If they're still getting it for the same price and everybody's healthy and things are growing, it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, I'm amazed that comic book stores still exist. It's just, I guess people are passionate and they sell more than just comics, and they can take an incredible amount of abuse.
I will physically cry if certain stores go away. Like guys like Joe Field. I've been shopping at Joe Field's store since I was 14 years old. He created Free Comic Book Day. There's videos out there, you can find them. I'm a kid interviewing Joe Field at 15 years old. I had my own.
Oh wow.
Yeah, if you can go on his YouTube, Flyco Joe.
That's cool. Very cool.
You search Flyco Joe and Dan Fraga, and you'll see me. I got a full head of hair, wearing a Batman shirt, interviewing Joe.
That's awesome. No mustache?
No, man. I couldn't grow any hair back then. That sort of thing. It's like, having like a friend die. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just, you don't want that to happen. You don't want that to happen.
Well, I look, it's funny because it's, in a way, obviously retail stores, they're sort of competition, but they are keeping comic stores and keeping comics alive in one way or another. Right now, that's being taken advantage of by evil social justice warriors. But, back in the day, Dan, I don't know what the F happened, because in the early 90s, we would have loved it if Marvel would have gone and done, ridiculous, communist, hateful comics and, attacked fans. Who would have been like, well, this is easy. Like anything else, people are going to just buy anything except that.
Right.
But if they're all doing it, I guess it's all kind of the same thing.
I still get caught up in the why, it's like maybe I have to be a little more conspiracy minded, but I go, why would you do this? Like if all of your markets outside of the comics, like your movies and your games and your cartoons, are based on all of this history that has been around since '63, why would all of a sudden?
You know what? I think I have an answer to that.
Yeah.
Because this is so. Comics was such a strong influence on me in my early and mid-teen years, and then by that point, I started fucking publishing. Ninja Turtles came out in '84. I was publishing in that black and white boom by '86. So I was kind of there back in the day, first as a reader and a fan, and then as a teenage comic book publisher.
Where were you doing this out of? Where were you?
I was in Massapequa, same town I live in now, Long Island, New York, South Shore.
Man. I was going to say, because you're 3 years older than me. Like if you were in Northern California, you and I would have been best friends. I wouldn't have left you alone, dude.
Oh, cool, man. Well, hey, we're still young men. We still got a couple of years on us.
Yeah.
And I was published out of Brooklyn, which was an hour away. And that was the same guys who were publishing Jim Lee. And they offered to distribute and print the comic. And I found them because I was just a precocious kid. And I was buying comic books on speculation. I bought this one terrible black and white comic called Black Moon. I bought like 200 copies in the black and white boom as a kid. I talked my brother into splitting the cost with me. And we bought them from Crown Distributors, which is a comic distributor out of Brooklyn. Yeah. And it came out so bad. And I was like, well, if this book is so bad, then I can do one that's at least this bad. And then I wound up doing the G.I. Jackrabbits, which the first couple of pages are great. The cover is great. And the idea is great. It's coming back with a FRAGA cover, no doubt.
The cover.
No doubt, no doubt. I'll get back to you on that one.
I'm excited about that.
But yeah. Oh, man. I definitely think I got lost on my point about that, brother. I'm having too much fun. That's why.
You were talking about being part of the early market in your teens. You said you read comics in your teens.
Oh, when I was so influenced by where comics went wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. I got it now.
You got it.
So then I discovered more and more Marvel comics, more and more of what like Jim Shooter did with Secret Wars. He completely pulled me in with that. I was loving on Frank Miller's Daredevil. And I bought Alpha Flight. I kind of bought everything. But you know how it is. Like there's just a couple of titles and a couple of characters that really resonate with you. For me, it was Frank Miller's Daredevil characters. I freaking loved that.
Yeah.
But there was such structure and there was such discipline and so much like black and white clear truth about what was good and what was not good under the Jim Shooter regime.
Yeah.
So
Jim he was a double-edged sword.
No, he was. His thing is he holds a lot of knowledge and he uses it. So he's worked with Mort Weisinger, Stan Lee, Julie Schwartz, other names that I don't recall, but he worked with the greats and he's in the industry for an incredibly long time. People think I'm old. Jim's older. He's 20 years, 25 years old.
Cane now, man. He's rocking a cane now.
He's he's still around, but it's been a few years. And he worked with me on one project. We did a couple of things that I've not published yet. And I'll probably wind up sharing some of that stuff with you, and we'll see if I publish it or not. Yeah, some cool stuff. But the point about Jim is he could just be like he has the kind of face where he looks like he's mad when he's not mad.
The RBF.
Yeah, the resting face. So, but the point was he knew from all his years of working with all of his mentors, like what was right and wrong for comics, kind of, or else.
Right.
So would he have let Todd McFarlane do his own thing? No. And he probably would not have. He wouldn't have, and we would have lost something in comics because of not allowing those guys. Unless those guys eventually went off and did their own image thing anyway, and it was even bigger of a success. but they did make their bones by kind of creating, like Todd McFarlane created his version of Spider-Man. So he was able to stand on the shoulders of greatness, so to speak, Todd McFarlane, in terms of being able to have a platform to show people what he could really do with a character that, you know, everybody was watching. Right. Same thing with Robert Kirkman. Robert Kirkman did that with zombies, with Marvel Zombies, and got his platform from Marvel, and then went off and did Walking Dead. But that said, that's a bit of the problem editorially, is things are so wacky now that what their priorities are, what the editors' priorities are not the same priorities that the editors were when Shooter took over at Marvel. And then when Shooter had first come in there were a lot of people that were doing bullshit work and giving friends to jobs and a lot of like wacky cronyism, stuff like that, giving friends like editors, assistants, writing jobs and trading jobs back and forth. It wasn't about the merit. It wasn't about what was right for the character. It was about like who you knew. Right. And it was basically abuse of power. Yeah. So the purpose of an institution and the purpose of a structure is to put the values and the truth of what's good in place. And yes, there's going to be a price to pay because you're going to have limitations on the good things you can do. But by creating that institution, that's what protects all the values. And that's how you can have that mentorship, you know, and that's how you can kind of bring people along in a system, which doesn't mean you can't do epic comics. It doesn't mean people have to be stuck and structured in the system. Doesn't mean that people can't own their own things. You know,
I have a page from Epic Illustrated #1.
Holy cow! What is it?
It's Art Soydum.
Oh wow!
Heads, page 1. I own that original. It's gorgeous.
Wow!
Yeah.
Wow.
You brought up Epic, and when I was a kid, I grew up in a very comic rich area, right? And when I say that, I mean you had Michael Friedrich's Star Reach Productions over in Berkeley. You know, I grew up in
Mike Friedrich.
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area, so like, you know, I knew about Eclipse, I knew about Kitchen Sink, I knew about all this stuff, and like, you know, Comics Relief, like these were like
Comics was like 7 stores, weren't they?
Oh, they had a lot of stores. Yeah. But that and then of course we had Joe Field with his Flying Colors and Rod with Land of Neverwas. But I got to get my comic experience, of course. I got to get my experience in a sort of deep dive sort of way. You know, it wasn't just mainstream. I got introduced to a lot of stuff, and obviously, like I talked to you about Fred and American Fun, the tastes ran the gamut in that comics club. So I got to see a lot of stuff, and obviously I picked what I wanted to pick, which makes me think about Comicsgate and the similarities to Image, and how where we can have idealistic ideas. Like you and I think, are very much in alignment on a lot of things. The beauty of Comicsgate is that we're all sort of satellites, right? We represent, obviously we have what I call the edicts of, you know, fan first, respect, and standing up for what is right, and not, you know, not talking shit on your customers, and also fighting the good fight. Like I'm not going to let any wokey asshole try to, you know, tear things down. But, you know, last night I did a stream and I was talking about the concept of somebody saying you'll never work in mainstream again, right? And what I said was, it's funny to me because I feel like the mainstream is the horse and buggy business.
Yeah. Yep.
And I feel like Comicsgate is the automobile business, and I don't care how much they say I'll never work in horse and buggies again, because I'm in cars. You know?
Yeah, you don't need it. What we're doing, and whether or not they catch on in the mainstream or not, and they won't, because it's not creator focused. And, you know, I might build my institution, you know, I might rebuild my studio and get Kirk back with me. And, you know, we may do that. You know, someone might publish 1 or 2 books a year, like Ethan Van Sciver, and sell $1 million worth of books every time he publishes it, and then go and make his own toys and his own movies and whatever else he wants to do with the character or characters that he wants to develop. with Comicsgate, we have an unlimited platform. It's sort of like, but what exists is just the energy and the passion, and then the respect for everybody else who's in it, which is why it's so crucial to always respect everybody else who's in the game.
Right.
Like you're in the Comicsgate game, I'm in the Comicsgate game, Ethan is. Everybody who's in the game, we have to always respect each other. And if we don't, we have to make it straight and make it right immediately. It doesn't mean like I pissed somebody off, I insulted somebody once, and then I saw they weren't the same with me, and I was just kind of joking around, but I said something and it just really affected the person the wrong way. I saw when things were different. I went and talked to them, apologized, or like, hey, it's all good, it's all cool, and that was it. You know what I'm saying? But so no, the point is never to not have conflict. The point is to treat conflict like the fucking enemy that it is. Conflict is not a fucking strength. Conflict is a fucking enemy. We do not need to straighten each other out. We need to help each other out.
It's interesting though, because you know, there was a time, like I used to be a big time wrestling fan, you know, and I always knew it was fake, but you know, I'm also a big fan of magic, you know, like sleight of hand magic. And I know probably 90% of the tricks on street magic. Neat. So one of my favorite things is like when I watch someone, I'm not just watching like, oh, I'm going to be tricked. I'm watching how good they are at doing that trick, you know? And when I watched wrestling, one of the things that I noticed that was always really interesting was that these dramas were created, like, let's say you have two characters that you're used to seeing together and everything's copacetic, right? Like take the Hardy Boys, like the Matt and Jeff Hardy, and everything's good and you see them wrestle and they're great. But at a certain point you're like, yeah, they're great. And you just like, you kind of,
it's not getting old.
Right. But then they go, well, what if they made them mad at each other and one of them spit in the other's face, and Lita took sides and went with one, and this guy, you actually sided with him, and now they're heels and they're hanging out with the bad guys, and suddenly you're tuning in because you're like, how's this going to resolve? Will it resolve? And it creates eyeballs, you know? But that was a very controlled, you know, you couldn't wait till they got together and fucking like, we're homies again, we're bros, and let's go kill the common enemy. Like, we love that. Like, as human beings, we love that. I mean, since the Roman Colosseum days, we love that. So I see it. I see the value in it. Not in when I say that, I don't mean I support it. I see the value in it, but I'm much like you, where I'd rather just instead of figure. I almost feel like drama is cheap.
Yeah, I guess the thing of it, I look at it this way is, if it was contrived, if you and I are getting along great tonight, we're having a great interview, we're having a great time talking. Yeah, everybody back.
I want to fight you now. Let's fight.
Well, that would be the thing, is like we would well, that way. Yeah, we would secretly kind of
pugilists. Yeah.
So, we would, you know, if we secretly contrived something behind the scenes as like kind of entertainment, because this is sort of reality show-ish or whatever, we're like, all right, we're going to pretend that we have a dispute over the G.I. Jackrabbits cover, whatever, you know, we could do that and it could be entertaining for people. But the thing is what seems to really work for us on YouTube is just like the sincerity of what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, so people really know like you're being real. So people know this is not a wrestling thing that's going on.
Well, that's my thing, you know, like my doing comics, I'm part of Comicsgate. My doing comics is part of my bigger thesis. And my thesis is if you go to my YouTube channel and look at the about, I'm about creators, and I'm about creativity, and I'm about creative empowerment. I know my own journey. I know, like, the thing that I can say it's a pet peeve. It's not something I get mad at, but when someone like someone that doesn't draw, that isn't a comics fan, sees my work and they go, "Oh my God, you're so talented. You must have, been the best." And and I have to say to them, well, actually, no, I fucking sucked. Like I really sucked. I was the worst. When I showed up in 8th grade, I was the worst. And I was like, I love this, but these guys are fucking making me look like shit. Then I went up to high school and there were people that destroyed me, and I don't learn fast. And I'm kind of like, I'm slow. I will get it, but I'm slow. what that ends up doing is I have to go through this process that once I learn something, I'm at the point now where I want to give it back to people and say, hey, here are all the pitfalls that I ran into. Let me give you the shortcut. Let me tell you where all the bears and the Indians lie when you go west. I went west. I got a couple of arrows still stuck in my back and a bear slash on my leg. I want you never to have that. So let's go this way.
And that, you know what, man, that's part, I think, of us getting a little bit older too. Because I'm in that game as well. I almost feel like, look, I don't know how much more time I have. Like, I'm not going anywhere. My health has always been great, but I got this feel you really want to pass along. If there's anything that we know, especially that makes things a little easier for somebody, we always want to hit them up with it.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I want everybody to back into oblivion Black Flag.
Oh, look how
Black Flag
94, man. That's awesome.
I'm refreshing it right now. We are at 93,929.
It's awesome.
Guys, this thing's going to break 100,000. You can help make it happen. We have 20 days left. Unless it extends, it might go a little bit longer, but we love having Dan Fraga as part of Comicsgate. I mean, I can't even imagine what Comicsgate would be like if you weren't around, Dan.
Man.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere.
Man, it's great.
Now we're going to build an empire off of your energy. I appreciate you, man. I really do. And also, let's back College of the Dead. I appreciate you guys have supported me so much already. But College of the Dead is going to be shipping June 2020.
Awesome.
Show this campaign real quickly, quickaroo over here. It has gone up. We got 28 hours left, so I'm not going to go to. I'm going to go to.
Oh man, you're getting close.
Yeah, man, we're getting close. This is my 30-day extension. I am going to keep it in demand. I believe in demand. I think it's important. Let people be able to get the book. So it's not really the last chance to be able to get the book, but it helps to always push up the numbers when we get the book and people back. It's how exciting it is, Dan, to get that email, right? It says like you got this new backer, that new backer.
I love it. I think that's great.
The best money we ever made, right? Just kind of being in this game, being able to just get on, talk to people creatively, meet new people.
For me, like what the money represents to me, and I always go back to McFarlane because McFarlane, I feel like he and I maybe come from the same planet. I might have been hatched a little later than him, but he did this interview on Complex called The Blueprint, and he said for him it's about sustainability, and it's about, like, of course he loves the money because the money pays for the art. Like, that's all I want to do. One of the questions I ask, and I asked Mike Mignola on my interview with him yesterday, and I've asked Todd on my interview with him, is if money was no object, if you woke up every day, what would you want to be doing? You woke up, all your bills are paid, you don't have to worry about shit. I'd want to make a 196-page story every year, and I want to do YouTube shows. That's what I want to do, whether I was getting paid or not. Like, as long as like things are taken care of. I got my 4 kids and my wife and all that, but
for sure,
that's my ultimate goal. But also, if I can provide that for other people, if I, my book has more than doubled my expectations. Like, I had very simple wants and needs of being able to pay for the book and that sort of thing. And I said, if this thing does better than that, I'm going to get my second book out and I'm going to hire a team. And now I can provide dreams and fulfill dreams for someone else. So the money to me equals sustainability and being able to bring more of what I love. So to me, it's a big win for everybody. It's a win for the reader. It's a win for me. It's a win for other creators.
Yeah. For me, I look at it and I say, like, we're supposed to be making the future for comics. 20 years ago, it was other guys that were in their 40s. 20 years before that, it was other guys that were in their 40s. Marvel used to be Timely. You know how many different companies own Marvel Comics? And it's not even just like since Ronald Perlman or Cadence. Right. They used to have a new corporation like every year or two. Like, I don't know if it was for scamming on printers or what the heck their deal was. But
you need to talk to Chaikin.
Chaikin knows all of it?
No, Chaikin knows where all the bodies are, dude.
Is that Howard Chaikin?
Yeah. He basically, I had a breakfast with Chaikin and Larry Hama last year. And basically, like, it was a big money laundering thing, you know, like it was like in the old days, it was money laundering. Comics,
mafia stuff.
Yeah, it was money laundering. But yeah, and a lot of people don't know the fact that Jack Kirby was 45 years old when he drew FF1. You know, like you said, all these.
It's always motherfuckers in their 40s. So the thing of it is we don't need to be talking about, you know, Marvel needs to do this and Marvel needs to do that. It's our responsibility to do the right thing.
It's us.
It's us now. Not that we are Jack Kirby and Stan Lee or like that. But Jack Kirby, I'm Stan Lee. But
Adam, at the end of the day, we are. You had said something earlier. We were talking about other publishers, and I wanted to say I'm of the mind, and that's why I brought up the horse and buggy thing. I'm sorry, fans out there. I don't give a fuck about Spider-Man and Batman anymore. I don't. I really don't. I don't care about Star Wars. I care about College of the Dead. I care about Cyberfrog. I care about Johnny Phantasm. I care about Black Flag. That's what I care about. And yes, we aren't Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. We're Adam Post and Dan FRAGA. And it's our responsibility to be and do our best all the time so that we can inspire others to be and do their best.
Yeah, we're going to bring you guys along with us if you want to join us. And this is all merit-based. You know, we don't get to be in charge. There's nobody who's in charge. There's just guys doing the work, you know, and that's what it's about. Yeah. Dan, I really, really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
It was great talking to you. This is definitely one of my favorite interviews. I definitely want to do more future comics. And when you have time, we can see if you can mix it up with other people too. I think the more we talk about it, the more we make it happen. We got to conceptualize it before we're going to be able to create it, right? I mean, there's a sequence there. You're the sequence guy, you know, the mind mapping. You got to school us on that.
You'll love them, man. Tony Buzan, Mind Maps.
I opened Mind Manager. Is that it?
Mind Map. Look up. There's a lot of fakers out there. Look up Tony Buzan, Buzan. He wrote a couple books on the brain, how to use the whole mind system, left and right brain. But Mind Map, Tony Buzan.
I'm saving the search, and I can do a little research. Everybody else, check that out. Mind Map, Tony Buzan, or at least just Mind Map Buzan. You'll find it. Dan, incredible pleasure. Hail the chat, guys. Thank you so much. Remember to back Black Flag. Very important book. Very, very important book. And yeah, College of the Dead. Check me out as well. I'll be shipping in June. Dan will be shipping early. It's going to be exciting. Comicsgate all the way. And guys, we can't thank you enough. Have a great night, everybody.
Be well.
See you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you. That's my Adam Post thing.
I love it.
I know, it's cute.